this episode. Who are giants, mythical creatures, or real inhabitants of the Earth? Almost every nation has their own epic about giants. According to these narratives, huge creatures lived next door to humans. Some of them were angry and did dirty tricks. There were those who helped people. Moreover, there is a description of various types of these creatures: one-eyed, giants of stone, giants with two heads, giants completely covered with hair, and many others. In Kazakh mythology, there are also such giants, stories about which were carefully passed from mouth to mouth. However, not so long ago, in the century, almost the entire Kazakh print media was full of sensational headlines that the remains of a man whose height exceeded 3.5 meters were found in the village of Yamansai. An archaeological expedition was sent there almost immediately, but soon the craze has died down, the giant was forgotten, and the owner of the site where the burial was discovered banned any shooting. My name is Andrei Slozhin, it is the Time Puzzle, and today we are going to find out the truth about the giants in Kazakhstan. There are many legends about the giants all over the world. Some legends tell us about giants who help people, some, on the contrary, tell about evil giants or even man-eaters. In addition, the descriptions of these giants in different parts of the world are very similar, whether they are giants from legends of American Indians or Greek myths. A psychologist, Yulia Dyakova, told us about how our ancestors ranked the giants. In the Scandinavian tradition, giants could be stupid, and this was something that allowed people to win them somehow, at least by being more intelligent than a brainless monster. And there were myths in which giants could be helpers. In fairy tales, they could also be helpers. That is, when a man made a giant his friend and ally. Where could the giants come from? Alternative researchers have three main versions. The first is representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations. The second is our ancestors who eventually got smaller. The third version is that giants are representatives of ancient civilizations who lived on Earth long before humans. The first description of a human's relationship with a giant can be considered the myths that were written by Sumerians. Theorist of literature, Valeria Korotkova is great in this ancient mythology. Generally, the Sumerians' religion is the oldest we know, and the most ancient mythology known to us from those recorded is the Sumerian myths. There is a legend about a monster, the Giant Humbaba. This is the same Humbaba who guarded the satyrs in the mountains of Lebanon. And just like that, Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu, on their own initiative, went to the mountains of Lebanon to destroy this monster Humbaba. There are also cave paintings that depict giants. Archaeologist Alexander Goryachev became seriously interested in this issue. I have been engaged in archaeology for 30 years. Actually, my archaeology career began with the giants. However, these giants were carved on the rock. There are several such rock paintings in Kazakhstan. One of them, that was studied by Alexander Goryachev, is located in Almaty region, 12 kilometers from the village of Kabal, at the foot of the mountain system of the Jungarian Ala town. Archaeologists refer these drawings to the Bronze Age. This stone on which the scene of the giant's capture is painted deserves special attention.
Изображение великана есть на одном из петроглифов.
There is an image of a giant on one of the petroglyphs that was found by Professor Alexei Nikolaevich Maryashev, our famous archaeologist. Unfortunately, only this spring he left us. He found this petroglyph on the Aksu River. This is the Bronze Age. This giant is depicted standing in front of people. People are depicted 3 times smaller in size. They aim for him. And apparently, the giant has a second signal system. He is fluent in sign language, because he stands in a defeatist pose. He raised both hands up, asking for mercy. That is, he somehow can communicate with people. He knows how to signal to people that he would not harm them. If we discard all sorts of theories about the origin of giants in the world and narrow this moment to our country, then in the Kazakh Epic, giants are inextricably linked with the mountains. The candidate of philological sciences, Kairat Janabayev, told us about this. All our giants are associated with mountains. As I said, Togay lifted the mountain and Black Megan came out. The famous Tepegios lives in the cave, in stones, in these mountains. That is, the power of the giant and the power of the stone, they are interconnected. Generally, giants, they created such a special layer in mythology, in the epic and in fairy tales, because it is something fantastic, something interesting, something attractive. It always causes surprise and mystery, some kind of mystery. Megalithic structures around the world also heighten people's interest to giants. Alternative historians believe that many buildings of antiquity were built by some more developed creatures or by people who possessed tremendous growth and power. This version is shared by Kazakhstani alternative researcher Jibek Kasenov.
Я бы сюда приписал бы китайские пирамиды.
I would also mention the Chinese pyramids. There are about 100 of them. Angkor Wat, and indeed most of the temples that are located in Southeast Asia. There are also many Indian temples, and we still don't know how they could build it in the past. Some of them are just carved perfectly in rocks, just perfect columns, beautiful figures, cows and other animals. As evidence of the existence of giants, researchers around the world present a huge amount of artifacts that are stored in museums in different countries.
В альтернативной истории очень много фактов.
In the alternative history, there are a lot of facts and findings leading to the existence of giants, but everyone speaks about it in his own way. There are bones, some other remains, as well as museum exhibits that are large in size, swords, household items. There are even guns. Now the official history calls them guns for ducks. They are almost 3 meters. No man can lift such a gun. Coming up next, how official science explains the assumptions of alternative scientists. Indeed, in many museums of the world, there are some artifacts which at first glance look like something amazing created for giants. However, historians are inclined to believe that huge swords were created as certain religious items. Huge axes were used by executioners in the Middle Ages, and several people would lift them at once. As for the huge guns, they really existed, and they were developed specifically for hunting ducks. People used to shoot them while sitting in boats. Such hunting was especially widespread in the 19th century in England and the USA. However, later the authorities banned the hunting with such guns as the number of waterfowl decreased. During the excavation of the Yemensai giant, A certain artifact was also found. Later, allegedly, it was lost. This was written in the print media's Kazakhstanskaya Pravda newspaper dated October 12, 2007. And they even looked for it with the help of special services. However, as I was able to find out, the artifact is now stored in the Central State Museum of the Republic of Kazakhstan, where I'm going to meet an employee of the Archaeology Center of this museum, Olga Myakisheva. This is a bronze incense burner. It refers to the 5th, 4th century BC, to the culture of the Sakas. There are typical images of that period, and they represent the so-called Scythian zoomorphic ornament. The incense burner is a dish on an open-work stand, on the edges of which there are 16 leopards, and at the center of the sacrificial scene lies the sacrificial argali, and there are 2 wolves and 2 crows around it. In our museum there are 3 similar burners, and they are all found in the city of Almaty, in Remizovka village, or Yemensai in the foothills of the Ili Alatab. As it turned out, this find has never disappeared. Modern scientists are far advanced in the study of various archaeological remains and artifacts. Now radiocarbon analysis, genetics and other dating methods are used to determine the age of objects found during excavations. According to the scientists themselves, they are ready to believe in the existence of giants, but this requires certain facts. As an ordinary researcher, I can say this: my mind is open to any variant that I can meet during excavations. But as long as there is no such fact, and moreover, the problem itself has been studied by well-known experts in their field for almost a century, and scientists still do not have such facts. And I emphasize once again, one bone is not enough when we want to find out the parameters of beings. In turn, alternative historians believe that among scientists there is a conspiracy that hides a huge amount of evidence of the bones of the giants. For example, more than once there was information that such remains were found in Oceania, Mexico, in the United States, North Africa, Australia, in the Philippines and in Europe. In addition to skeletons and skulls, researchers also stumble upon fossil marks left by huge legs. For example, in 1912, in a Transvaal province in South Africa, a local farmer discovered a fossilized human footprint. The length of the print was almost 1.5 meters. Width is 76 centimeters. Exactly the same imprint was found on the island of Ceylon and is called the Foot of Adam. In Kazakhstan there is a similar footprint of a giant. It is located 30 kilometers from the city of Ust-Kamenogorsk in the place called Agbaur. But according to scientists, there is nothing mysterious in it. This is what the archaeologist, head of the Agbaur complex, Galina Petenyova, tells us about it.
Это так называемый культурный феномен чешуевидных углублений. Так это теперь называется.
This is the so-called cultural phenomenon of the craters. That's how it is called in the scientific literature. Such objects are found around the globe. They are called differently. They are called perstovek, from Russian perst, or finger. They have small round deepenings. Sometimes they are called cups, when the deepening is medium in size. They can be generally huge. Here on Karabas we have such deepenings that are 4 meters in diameter. A whole bath. When it rains, it is filled with rainwater. It's like a swimming pool. They can be both horizontal and vertical. They also can look like a human trace. Some of them are like a bare foot and some are like booted feet, like a shoe imprint. They can be seen on the top of the grotto. There are prints that look like a palm, like a human palm. So how come the different nations have legends about giants? For now, only myths and explanations of psychologists can answer this question. Myths and tales, they explain so many events in our lives. In fact, until recently, fairy tales were not only for children, they were for adults. They were like guidelines for people. Fairy tales showed some role models, behavior patterns, how to behave during illnesses, how to behave during some unhappiness, adversity, and natural disasters. So in the Kazakh Epic there is a story about a giant and an old man who cunningly defeated a giant. In the fairy tale it is said that the giant caught the old man and wanted to kill him, to which the old man told that he himself was strong and it would be better for the giant to live for his own good. In response, the giant laughed and took a stone in his hand. He squeezed his hand and sand spilled from it. However, the old man said that he is stronger than the giant and will be able to squeeze out moisture from the stone. The cunning man took a plum out of his bag, squeezed it in his palm, and of course the juice leaked out. The giant was frightened and left these places. However, not all giants were bad. There were those who helped people. Satak Pai, for example, if we talk about the benefits to people, he taught people how to live correctly. He taught people art, healing. He paved rivers so that people could live near them. He built cities. Sartak, the very word Sartak refers to the agricultural type of the gods. He's like Greek Prometheus. Modern psychology can explain such an attitude to the giants. Man, as a social being, always needs the approval of others. People always needed someone who would be more than they are, the one who inspired them to aspire. And when people could not find any rational explanation to some phenomenon, they endowed it with human features, and they deified it and made something big and great. For a child, a giant is always a parent figure. Very often it is the father figure. And if we are talking about adults, it is often the case that we create an idol for ourselves, invent some kind of idol, which we then look up to. This may be a real figure, or it may be some kind of fictional character. Curiously enough, but religion had a huge influence on the formation of the image of the giant. At first, these were some pagan rites, which are actually drawn on all the same rocks. Victory over a giant means victory over chaos, establishing harmony in nature. The Kazakh myths, legends of those who were descendants of the creators of petroglyphs, also serve as confirmation of this theory. For example, the giant Telbegay, who devours people, and the moon fights the giant, the moon warrior. First, the sun went down, burned everything around because people could not fight the giant. But people asked it to stop because it could not fight with a giant. Because people died, the water dried up. The moon descended, and when the moon comes and goes over and over, and people believed that it is because they win one after another. One by one, Telbegay wins, then the moon warrior wins. And Telbegay giant was a man-eater. In the future, these images were described in religion. According to religious scholars, almost all beliefs have an image of a giant. Islam has Adits, Judaism has Anakim, Christianity has Goliath. Some sons of the gods. By the way, there is one such popular translation which is not very accurate. Sons of God. In fact, experts say we should understand it as the sons of the gods, who love the daughters of the earth, earthly girls. They considered them very beautiful and began to take them as wives. And the daughters of men and these mysterious sons of the gods were the parents of the giants, who then began to breed, and as the Old Testament said, they behaved very badly. They were rather arrogant, uncontrollable, and it was these giants, the Nephilim, who provoked Jehovah to send the flood to the earth. The Bible says that in general God wanted to get rid of them, because they were uncontrolled and immoral. And he destroyed this tribe of giants. But apparently not all of them, because we meet the giants later in later chapters of the Bible. When Moses leads his tribe along the Sinai Peninsula in search of the Promised Land, they meet these giants. By bringing together myths, fairy tales, religious writings, and various megalithic structures, some of the researchers derived a theory about the existence of the races of giants. This is what the famous esotericist of the 19th century, Helena Blavatsky, writes in her books. It was a race of Lemurians. She wrote that their height was about 5 meters. And the second race of giants, she called them Atlanteans. They were a little smaller and they already existed in a dense body. According to Blavatsky, sentient beings on Earth were shrinking all the time. But this was also due to the fact that their body was becoming more and more solid. This solid shell, of course, it could not be very large, otherwise they would be crushed by their own weight, because they would not withstand gravity. However, official science considers Blavatsky's claims as unfounded and lack of any evidence. Also, scientists reject the idea that representatives of science hide evidence of the existence of giants. When you do not find any evidence of your point of view in your research, there are 2 ways to solve the problem. Look for them silently and thoroughly. And the second way, to say that everything is being hidden from me, that everything has been stolen and I simply have no access. Otherwise, I would show you everything. Do you understand? I can say one thing. Any researcher, archaeologist who today in our conditions would not find the skeleton of a giantrop, Megantrop or Gigantopithecus, this person would become a world celebrity. Why hide it? He would be the first to blow the trumpets all over the world. Coming up next, scientists recognize the existence of giant humanoid creatures. Despite the paradox of this topic, I was still able to find facts indicating that the giants existed. Yes, the giants lived in our land. They discovered just a tooth. And they found it not in archaeological excavations, but in the store. Giant tooth, like the fang of a monkey-like or anthropomorphic creature. In 1935, the German paleontologist Gustav von Königswald visited Hong Kong on a working visit. One day he went to the market and saw in the Chinese shop a huge tooth resembling a human one. According to the scientist, the tooth was twice as large as that of the gorilla. The merchant assured the paleontologist that it was a dragon's tooth. Scientific interest spurred Gustav to buy and explore this artifact. There was a heated debate among the scientists about the fact that man descended from a once huge creature. Much later, anthropologists have already discovered the preserved jaw of such a giant. That was in 1956. Controversy resumed again, and some scientists were already convinced that the giants did exist. Comparing the size of the found jaw with the jaw of a person and comparing their size, an approximate growth of the creature was calculated.
Такая более старая классическая школа антропологов.
Classical school of anthropologists believes that those remains have nothing to do with the evolutionary scheme of a human. But they belong to close, ape-like creatures. Indeed, their parameters are drawn quite huge, from 3 to 6 meters.
Действительно, их параметры рисуются достаточно огромными, от 3 до 6 метров. Однако есть замечательные...
However, there is such a wonderful note or remark. An outstanding Soviet anthropologist Alexeyev used to say, "A huge jaw does not mean huge growth." Further research allowed to establish even what this creature ate. Anthropologists, dentists, zoologists, and even experts who study the mythology of giants were involved in the process of studying the jaw. According to legends, giants in many nations of the world ate meat, but the owner of the jaw was a vegetarian.
Исследования, которые проводились.
Studies that were carried out on the teeth of these creatures showed that they were exclusively, or for the most part, herbivores.
В большинстве своем травоядными.
After a great deal of study of their remains, these scientists concluded that they belonged to Gigantopithecus, which supposedly lived from 2 million years to nearly 300,000 years ago. Therefore, many researchers suggest that most likely the myths of ancient people about the giants could be born due to the fact that our ancestors found the skulls of these creatures or in a living encounter with them.
Они относятся ко времени пятикантропа, то есть речь идет о миллионе или где-то...
They refer to the time of Pithecanthropus. It is about 1 million or somewhere close to that time years ago. Therefore, we can't expect that some of them could survive to the present day. So many years ago, even Homo sapiens did not exist as a biological species.
Но есть сторонники вот этой второй точки зрения, они считают, что...
But there are supporters of the second point of view. They believe that these same creatures survived until the period of Homo sapiens and were deposited in the minds of people in some way.
Собственно говоря, эти великаны напрямую участвовали в эволюции.
Some people even believe that these giants were directly involved in human evolution because of the myths and legends that the people came from the body of a giant. But these are all speculative conclusions.
Умозрительные заключения.
Recent studies of bone remains helped scientists to establish the exact date when these creatures became extinct, about 100,000 years ago. According to Russian and American anthropologists, people played a huge role in the disappearance of these giant ape-like creatures.
Если разобраться, то...
Just think of it. We survived and giants not. It turns out to some extent we ourselves, our civilization, are the cause of their disappearance. I suppose, however terrible it may be, but people are cruel. It is possible that the image of the giant in the cave painting is nothing more than the picture of hunting. Our ancient ancestors often depicted evidence of their hunting achievements on stones. We are not surprised by the drawings with ancient people who kill a mammoth or a deer. Then why do so many questions arise to the image of the hunt for Gigantopithecus? The answer, as always, can be found in the myths. It was a tribe with rather hostile attitude towards people. They killed people. And we see that world folklore describes giants as evil beings as well as quite narrow-minded ones. This explanation gives the best description of the behavior of a wild creature, an animal, during a hunt. In direct combat, an animal can easily kill a person, but it can fall into a specially prepared trap, and then it will be easier for a person to get it. Little humans turn out to be smarter than these giants. They deceive them, and by deceiving the giant, they save their lives. Gigantopithecus and the contact with them of ancient people is one of the explanations for the myths about giants. Of course, many alternative historians reject it, citing the fact that it is impossible to draw conclusions and recreate the image of a huge monkey based only on small remains. In addition, alternative researchers claim that such a small number of bones survived only because of the giants did not bury the dead, but cremated them like some nations.
Я понимаю, откуда взята калька, просто есть культуры, в которых умерших...
I understand where it came from. There are cultures in which the dead were cremated. Moreover, their ashes were poured to the river. Indeed, there is a settlement, there are traces, but there are no buried people. Proponents of the gigantic human ancestors just came up with the civilization of the giants by stating famous archaeological facts. They explained it like, well, since there are such human cultures, then why there couldn't be civilizations of giants? The process of cremation, even in the modern world, is quite energy-consuming and long. The body of the deceased is placed in a special oven where the temperature exceeds 1200 degrees Celsius. The body of the deceased burns for several hours. In ancient times, there were no special crematoria, and as a rule, the bodies were burnt on wood. But the tree burning temperature does not exceed 800 degrees.
Сам процесс кремации человека, допустим, без специальных приспособлений. Это очень трудоемкий.
The process of cremation of a person without special devices is a very laborious process. You need a huge, quite a significant amount of fuel. Moreover, fuel with high temperature. For ancient cultures and civilizations, even professing the culture of cremation after death, it was quite a serious problem. And therefore, finding burials with the remains of a cremated person, modern anthropologists can easily restore even the skull and long bones and anything. That is, everything is cremated but not to the ashes.
Все кремировано, но не до уровня праха.
The second version of the origin of legends about giants can be easily explained from a scientific point of view. In the world, there are many people whose height exceeds 2 meters. In China, for example, now lives a basketball player, Joly. His height is 2 meters, 46 centimeters. It is possible that in antiquity, there were also people whose growth was abnormal among fellow tribesmen. Giants, they never disappeared. Why is that? Because they transformed into images of heroes. The Kazakh Epic can be divided into archaic epic and a classical epic. In the archaic epos, giants and batyrs still coexist. Anthropologists confirm that human growth was not constant. In different ages, people either increased in size or decreased. Apart from everything else, there are also cyclical climate changes, which lead to the fact that at a certain historical period, due to low solar activity, people's height could decrease. Here's how, for example, medieval knights whose costumes look more like they'll fit for a teenager. There are burials of people, for example, in the middle of the first half of the second millennium BC, where there are women whose height is 185 centimeters, 190 centimeters, men whose height is 211 centimeters. And I only state the facts which I personally investigated. As for the Almaty giant, the data in the media about its growth constantly varied. There was 2.5 meters, then 3 meters. I managed to find accurate data about who was buried on that hill.
При этом жертвеннике был найден скелет и взрослого человека и ребенка. Ну, когда мы исследовали, то мы могли предположить, что
Besides, the altar skeletons of an adult and a child were found. During the investigation, we could assume that it was a woman with a child. But still, when we made an excavation and cut of this place,
такая как бы глиняная линза образовалась. И вот наши археологи, в том числе и Гульнара Саиловна Джумабекова,
we found that there was such a clay lens. And our archaeologists, including Gulnari Sailovna Jumabekova, she was engaged in the study of these altars. She suggested that there was some kind of sacred place where, with the help of this altar, the ancient Sakas performed some kind of religious ceremony.
представлял себя обычного человека, ну, точных размеров.
Visually, the skeleton belonged to an ordinary person. Well, I can't say the exact size right now, but at first glance, it was an ordinary person, like us. And no such external distinguishing features in it were noticeable.
Особенностей в нем чисто визуально не было заметно.
With the development of science, new discoveries are made almost every day, and ancient legends are crumbling. For example, gigantism. Scientists have found that unnaturally high growth is associated with disruption of the anterior pituitary in the brain and excessive production of the hormone somatotropin, which is responsible for growth. As a rule, changes occur in adolescence at 11-13 years, which ultimately leads to the fact that a person grows above 2 meters. The reduced release of this hormone causes dwarf growth. In the past, people did not know about it. They tried to explain incomprehensible processes based on personal experience. Most likely, this is how the giants and gnomes appeared. Nomads and horses were mistaken for centaurs. and people who knew psychology and healing were called sorcerers. My name is Andrei Slozhin. It was the Time Puzzle. See you.